What is going on? Thanks for tuning in to the MMA podcast. A beautiful Monday, August 6th. TMP 241 breaking down UFC 227, especially that big main and co-main event. TJ Dillashaw and Demetrius Johnson losing the historic 12-fight, 11-fight title reign is over. Henry Cejudo. For the first time in history, we have a flyweight champion who's not Demetrius Johnson. We're joined, as always, by Sweet Pappy Jones. Pat, what up?
Big Jake, it is a marvelous Monday. I'm friggin' jacked to the gills right now. Can't even contain myself. You think I was friggin' hitting up Vitor Belfort's magma supply. I got energy out the wazoo. Ready to get it, Jake.
He's got magma leaking out of his eyes. He's so jacked up. Like I said, UFC 227, a quick recap of that. And I did want to focus on those two title fights. But before we talk about those, anything else stand out from the rest of the card? You had Renato Moicano sub out Cub Swanson, who I guess spent like $25,000 to fly out all of his friends and family and get them all tickets just to have them watch him get subbed out in the first round. Cub, I wouldn't say he's at bum status yet. Lost to a very respectable featherweight, but yeah, this definitely puts him at gatekeeper status at featherweight. JJ Aldrich, a win over Polyana Viana. Thiago Santos, even though he put a one-sided beatdown on Kevin Holland, a lot of people were talking about Kevin Holland, who Dana White called Big Mouth when the fights were over. But it was a fun main card, although it lacked the star draw. Pedro Munoz, Ricky Simon, Ricardo Ramos, Shaman Marias, winners on the FX prelims. What stood out for you? We had a lot of unanimous decisions. I think we had 6 in a row up until the Cub Swanson fight. Anything stand out before we talk about that huge upset by Cejudo and the title retention by old TJ Dillashaw?
Yeah, there was a couple standouts here, mostly for myself on the Fight Pass portion of the card. Marlon Vera getting a nice TKO over Waluigi. Good scrap for as long as it lasted. That one went to the 4:53 mark in the second round. Some good fireworks there, and Alex Perez making quick work of Jose Torres. First round knockout via punches. Good showing there from Perez.
Yeah, I did not expect that one. I had Torres going into that fight at flyweight.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and see exactly what my picks were on that one. It was not the best card for myself. Picking Cub Swanson over Renato Moicano, in retrospect, I probably should have bet with my head, and if Cub would have won, then my heart would have been happy. That in and of itself, I was 5-7 as opposed to 7-5, or I don't even know how it worked out. Shit card for me for picks, except for the main event, predicting that one spot on. But no, it was some fun action all the way around. Did have that little lull with the decisions there, but Moicano versus Swanson, that was a great showing from Renato. He's definitely looking like a force at 145 pounds. JJ Aldrich with the perfectly executed game plan. Not quite as dog shit as Allen painted her to be. Got the W over Polyana Viana. Thiago Santos taking on Kevin Holland, taking out the fighter on short notice. Some pretty good scraps there overall.
Yeah, and that rolls us right into the co-main event. And talking about our picks, I believe we all picked Demetrius Johnson in a fight where, it looked early on like it was going to be Mighty Mouse's fight again. I think most people can agree that Mighty Mouse won rounds 1 and 3. Cejudo won rounds 4 and 5. And round 2 is up in the air. When I watched the fight live, I gave it to Johnson. Watching it back, that second round might be too close to call. I might actually score the fight a 48-48 draw. it sucks to see a belt that was held as long as Johnson, literally the longest title reign of all time. It sucks to see it end via a controversial split decision, but at the same time, as unfortunate as that is, I think it's good now that we have a little bit of parity at the flyweight division. You know, I mean, since they brought it into the UFC in 2012, we had one champ, and not that I think Henry Cejudo is necessarily going to make the flyweight division the most popular division in the UFC, but I think it adds a little intrigue to 125. I think you got to make the rematch next. You know, there are two reasons why you would schedule a rematch, because a rematch is not the preferred, option. You want to keep things fresh. But in my mind, there are two things that could warrant a decision. One, the champion who lost the belt was a historic reigning champion. Look at Weidman Silva 1 and 2. Silva got the rematch because he was such a dominant historical champion. One, a crazy title reign, which Johnson obviously has. He has the most historic title reign. Two, being the result of the first fight being a little controversial. Think back to Lyoto Machida versus Shogun Rua, when everyone thought Rua won, and that earned him the rematch. Johnson also gets in with that criteria. I think the only thing that would keep him from getting a title shot next would be an injury. I know he has an LCL injury, and his foot was pretty swollen. Don't know if either one of those is going to require injury, and it's probably so close from the fight that neither does he. So once we get a little bit of clarification as to how soon Johnson will be able to jump back in there, I think he deserves the rematch. Henry was talking about willing to move up and fighting up to 135, which I love the fact that he's willing to do that. But I think first things first, Mighty Mouse deserves a rematch. And even if for some reason he can't fight, I would still like to see perhaps Cejudo fight a Joseph Benavidez, who got a win against him in the past. Finally maybe he'll get a chance to be a UFC champ before he hangs up his gloves. Everyone thought that 125 would be his weight class when they announced plans for it. So yeah, it was a really close back and forth fight, and I give Henry all the credit in the world. Dude's maybe the best wrestler in the UFC. He's an Olympic gold medalist. Tons of heart. Seems like a really great guy. It's a really great story. But when it's the biggest title reign of all time, you kind of want to see it taken from the guy a little bit more definitively than, a kind of a 50-50 judges draw. And if you said it was a robbery either way, you don't understand what robbery means. This fight was way too close to be called an egregious decision, no matter who won. Pat, thoughts? What you think is next? Whether you think they should make a rematch? Thoughts on the fight?
Yeah, I thought it was a super close fight. This is definitely one of those ones where it really could have gone either way. I would have been not surprised at all to see it a draw. Demetrius win. I kind of thought it was going to Demetrius win just because, the old adage, you have to. What do they say? It's like the stupidest fucking saying in all of MMA. Like, you got to beat the champ.
You got to beat the man to be the man, or some shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is stupid. It's like, well, yeah. It's in theory it's nice, but it's like, no. Even if you beat him by a tiny bit, you still beat him.
Exactly. Like, even if it's not a devastating finish, like if you edge him out on the scorecards, you win the fight. So I'm certainly not. Was not surprised at all to see Cejudo get the win. Really, a lot of it was just as I'm watching, waiting for the scorecard to be announced, just thinking, how did they score the fight? Because, you can certainly see some fights that, or some judges that might go to Demetrius, some judges that might go to Cejudo. Increasingly, we're seeing draws more often. So I really wasn't sure how that went. I certainly wasn't disappointed to see Cejudo get the W. Great talent, man. What a great story. Great athlete. Definitely one of the best in the 125-pound division. And I think, like you said, Jake, I would definitely prefer to see something, such a historic title streak, the most successful title defense streak in UFC history. I would have liked to see that get ended a little more definitively. If there was like some kind of submission or, knockout or just a blowout decision in general, not one that was, could have gone anyway. That would have been a little nicer. And I'm also on board with you pretty much for that reason, as well as, just the fact Demetrius Johnson deserves it. I mean, people on the internet were calling for the 125-pound division to be closed up because no one could catch Demetrius. I personally didn't think anybody could catch Demetrius, Henry Cejudo included. I'll tell you what, for me, it was a little bit too close of a fight to be like getting paraded around on your coach's shoulders after the fight. I mean, I understand you're literally only the second person in UFC history to have the 125-pound belt. But the way Demetrius beat Henry Cejudo versus the way Henry Cejudo beat Demetrius, I'm like, one of those was much more impressive and much more worthy about celebration. But still, very pleased for Henry. I'm hoping Demetrius gets that immediate rematch and we get a little rubber match going on.
And bringing us to the main event, another rematch, TJ Dillashaw taking on Cody Garbrandt. This is a fight where I think you and Alan both picked it correctly. I went with Cody, and I still stick by my analysis that this is a fight where if you run it 10 straight Saturdays back to back to back, each guy will end up with 5 or 6 wins. It'll be closely contested. We saw that in the first fight where both got dropped. And we saw that both could finish the other. And this, like the first time, was TJ Dillashaw's night. He looked excellent in victory over Cody. Finished it, I believe, 4 minutes and 10 seconds in or something. A win that I think cements his status as the best bantamweight ever. It's either him or Dom Cruz, and the reason I give it to TJ, A, being the activity, and B, he's the one who ended the Barao era. He has now beaten Cody twice. Cody who beat Dom pretty one-sidedly. And yes, Dom does get credit for beating TJ, but how much credit? Because that was a razor-thin decision. I'm pretty comfortable right now with calling Dillashaw the best bantamweight of all time. And as far as looking ahead as to what's next for him, I think you have 3 options. You have Dominic Cruz, you have Marlon Moraes, and you have Rafael Assunção. The first one I would kick out of that group is Dominic Cruz. He's yet to fight since losing to Cody Garbrandt. I think he needs to get back in the win column. Also, I think the UFC needs to kind of mix up the bantamweights a little bit more. You look at, I believe, the last 4 title fights in that division have included the same 3 guys, Cruz, Dillashaw, and Garbrandt. So I think you need to introduce a new guy into that mix next time around. And if it's between Assunção and Moraes, Assunção has the longer win streak, which includes a win against Moraes. But I give it to Moraes for two reasons. One, Dillashaw fought Assunção 2 years ago at UFC 200, and it was a very one-sided fight. After watching that fight, even though it's been a couple years, I still think Dillashaw would whoop his ass exactly like he did the second time around at UFC 200. The other reason I give it to Marlon Moraes is he's not just coming off 2 huge first-round knockouts. His most recent knockout was against Jimmy Rivera, the guy who, had he not lost, I would say is next in line for a title shot. So that big win against Rivera, plus the fact that of those 3 guys, Marlon's the only person who has yet to face Dillashaw in a fight. I would love to see that matchup next between old Tyler James Dillashaw taking on the former Bellator standout Marlon Moraes. Bellator or World Series of Fighting? I know he had been bouncing all around. Regardless, Pat, main event thoughts before we put a bow on the podcast and send it out to the interwebs.
Yes. Well, our boy Marlon, he did come over from World Series of Fighting. I was kind of thinking about that in my head for a
That's what I
second
thought.
there. That was where he was cutting his teeth. But TJ versus Cody Garbrandt, #2, man, just as fantastic as the first fight was. Still back and forth. Cody did rock TJ with some big shots, but TJ almost immediately responded with a right of his own, dropped Cody right back, and man, Cody just never recovered from that first solid shot. It looked like he was just playing recovery, trying to get back there, and really couldn't. And TJ was relentless, just pounding on him, heavy on the back, hitting him with the ground and pound, hitting him with the standing strikes. He was throwing the kitchen sink at him, friggin' hitting him with the sweet Muay Thai knee, some elbows standing. A rare fight where a fighter was dropped without, the fight was stopped without the fighter really being dropped in the ending sequence. I mean, he was 100% out on his feet. Probably that sequence probably could have been ended a little bit earlier than that because T.J. Dillashaw was landing at will, just beating the dog shit out of Cody Garbrandt. It was quite a performance there, even better than the first one. TJ definitely cementing himself as the top of the class at 135 pounds. I don't know if I could say best ever at 135. I mean, he's got a strong case. Him and Cruz are the only people at the top of that list, and really, it's still kind of debatable. But man, that debate is starting to go more into TJ's people. He's doing things emphatically. At the level of activity, he's checking all the boxes right now. He's doing a fantastic job. As far as what is next, man, Marlon Moraes is definitely as deserving as anybody for the bantamweight championship fight. I mean, he's looked amazing. But I have to say, and even though that they fought twice, it's the rubber match. Rafael Assunção, I'd love to see him get that belt. He's on a 4-fight winning streak, taking out lots of top prospects himself along the way. Wins over Aljamain Sterling and Marlon Moraes, as you had mentioned, Jake, as well as a win over Rob Font, another good prospect at 135. Lots of decisions there, some splits, but Rafael Assunção himself has been one of the best 135-pounders from the WEC days, and as long as the UFC has had this division, he has been one of the absolute winningest fighters in the whole division. In fact, the only fight he's even lost in the UFC was one fight to T.J. Dillashaw in his UFC debut against Eric Koch. Since then, he's just beaten everybody in front of him. Had a great win streak. He's never fought for the belt in the UFC. I said, let's give him the rubber match. Old boy deserves it. He's been paying those dues for years. Marlon Moraes, he's a young buck, up and coming, all the talent in the world. I said, let him get next. And slide your boy Rafael Assunção in there for that strap.
And I do agree, out of Cruz, Assunção, and Moraes, the two that you don't give the title shot to should fight each other for a title eliminator fight. And I would like to see Dom Cruz take on Moraes or Assunção. I don't think he's fought either, so I think either of those would make a lot of sense. That's all we got for today. We appreciate you tuning in to our little UFC 227 recap. We will be back later in the week. I don't believe there's a card to break down this weekend, but, of course, a lot of scuttlebutt to talk about. Last Friday, we had that big presser, the official announcement of Khabib versus Conor at UFC 229. Probably talk a little bit about that as news trickles down for that October card. Pat, anything before we let the folks go?
Jake, nothing but love for the people, nothing but love for you, my man. It's been a marvelous Monday. Always a pleasure breaking it down with you. Hope everybody's motivated and ready to get it this week. Let's get it, Jakey.
Let's get it. It's a big Monday. Let your dick swing. We love you. We appreciate the shit out of you. Ramses, rest in peace. And until the next episode, we gone.